RLTK podcast. What is going on, everybody? Jordan here, kicking it with Chris. Chris, what is going on, bro?
Bro, bro, bro,
What a day.
it's always something. It's always something. We cannot, bro, it's always something, man. I don't understand. This is what I'm talking about. Like the disorder of things, the
Bro, it's
interruption.
so funny. So funny, bro. So funny. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen. You guys wouldn't notice, but this is actually take two because, we started and then we had a little interruption, which was hilarious. So we got this thing kicked off again. We here again. And Chris is this real talk. So, we keep it a buck. Chris is having a day
Yeah,
today. You
I
know what I
am,
mean? Which
bro.
is funny because
I
I've had
am.
actually an exceptionally good week. So
Yeah,
just the irony of that, right? Like we're both on
irony,
opposite
bro.
sides today. Like you're
I
like,
know.
yo, life is crazy right now. And I'm like, man,
Yeah,
this is the best week I've
life
had
is.
in a minute. Cause usually it's me being like, bro,
Yeah,
everything's terrible. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So
It's
anyways,
true, man. It's
but
true.
hey, we're grateful you guys are listening if you are. And
Yeah, facts, man.
we actually wanted to do this podcast a couple weeks ago. But like I said, life's been kind of crazy for both of us. And so we were hoping to have a little dialogue on the resurrection, the gospel. Obviously, Easter Sunday passed not too long ago, and we
Yeah,
celebrated the resurrection of Jesus and everything that means. Because obviously, that without that, we don't have anything. And so we were just thinking about, man, the resurrection. Young people, do they understand it? How do they need to understand it? How do they need to understand the gospel? What is transformative about that for them? How can the gospel help them understand the reality? Why is the resurrection essential and important? Obviously, as we know it is, but more specifically, how do we communicate it to this digitized, individualized, skeptical generation, Um, and so, yeah, Chris, I'm thinking the place I'd love to start is like, what is a way that you think we need to communicate the gospel to this generation or the resurrection to this generation, or what is like something they need to get about God in order to really understand him in the ways that they can understand him?
mm. I guess the thing I can really talk about is you got to give me a you got to be patient with me because I think this is pretty interesting. Is that we are actually a part of him and a sense of attributes, right? So it's
Mm,
like
I got you. So like image bearers.
they were image bearers, and
Okay,
so because we live in
bro, that's
a
so good.
world. What do you
Keep going.
mean?
My
Yeah,
brain just exploded. Keep going.
and I think because we live in a world where uh we think we can identify ourselves however we want,
Mm,
and um, we have take we have taken self-identification onto ourselves when it's the opposite when it comes to God. It's like He's the one that identifies who we are, and He identifies us within Himself. And so, the one way I would say it, I think, is there is no art that has been made that it's that is has been separated from the artist's mind itself.
mm,
And so, like, when an artist paints a painting, the painting is somewhat a reflection of the artist's mind.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing with God when He
That's
made
good.
us. And
Yep.
so I think
Which is the
He
Imago
had
Dei piece.
exactly. So I think that's something that I think they can understand. I think to some degree resonate with because a lot of these things that we're talking about is intrinsic truths that to some degree you just have to experience. But I think there are a lot of explanations that we can articulate for the generation that they can just ponder on and think about and let the mind wrestle with those concepts. So I would say that our existence is actually a part of God's mind. That's what I would say.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
as you were talking, what went off in my mind is like this idea of the Imago Dei, right? We're image bearers, and so there are things about us that reflect who God is, right? Like our passion for
yeah,
justice and
yeah,
mercy and the types of beautiful things that people do in the world that we know are inherently good, right? Those things are reflections of who God is. And so that point into who God is, but then also on the other side of that, there is this other nature, this lower nature, right? That is a part
yeah,
of us that always, like, I always say it this way, like, have you ever done something that you know you shouldn't do? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Everybody puts their
yeah,
hand up. Like,
yeah.
you know you shouldn't do it. You
Mm.
know, bro, this is a bad idea. If I do this, it's gonna go wrong. If I
Right, right.
if I go to this girl's house, it's gonna be all bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
if I break
Take
into
this
this
sip of
this
liquor.
yeah, exactly. It's all if I
Yeah,
take this sip of liquor, it's all downhill from here. And you know it
yeah,
and you do it
yeah,
anyway. And
yeah. It's true.
everybody resonates with that, right?
Facts.
And it's like,
Yeah,
yo,
man.
that's sin, dog. Like you can't even obey your own conscience. That's
Yeah,
crazy. You know what I'm
that
saying? We
is
can't
crazy,
even meet
man.
our own standard. And so
That's true.
while there's this potential that we have to create beautiful, wonderful things, to do incredible things for one another that reflect the very nature of God, right? There's also this lower nature that in that we reflect something else. And unfortunately, that lower nature seems to win out a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm,
I think in that conversation, that can tie into the resurrection and Jesus's conquering of that lower nature, right? His conquering of that sin that leads to death. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
And the
yeah.
restoration that can happen, the resurrection that can happen right now that leads into eternity when we have resurrected bodies, right?
Mm,
And so,
mhm.
yeah, bro, I was thinking
Yeah.
about that, and I was just thinking about how
I
justice
like
ties
that.
back to God,
I like
like
that.
the very nature of justice is something that comes from God, and none of us, like I was having this conversation with some of the youth at youth group this week. We were talking because we were practicing like sharing the gospel so that they can go share the gospel with their friends, and we were talking about um, God being just. And I'm like, yo, if somebody did something to your family and then you went to the court that day and the judge is like, yo, I'm just feeling merciful today. I'm just gonna let him off free. Would you have a problem with that? Yeah.
Mm,
Like if the judge
yeah.
just acquitted them just because the judge felt like it. In the
Yeah.
same way we have a problem when a judge is clearly prejudicial, right? In the sense like has prejudices and then sends someone unjustly to jail when we know they shouldn't have, right? And we see these things happen in our system all the time. And so um
Mm,
if that's true and we see that as unjust, okay, what we also have to understand is that that justness on the inside of us is once again another image bearing thing that comes from
mm,
God. And so God is just. And so God holds us accountable. And guess what? This isn't a situation where God's going to turn a blind eye to the evil in our world. And the evil in our world starts with us. Do you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And
Agreed.
so what's going to be done about that? We have
Yeah,
to
it's
be held
true.
accountable for that evil. And so either,
Mm,
once again, Christ takes on that evil for us, or we have to stand before God and be held accountable for that evil ourselves.
yeah.
And so just kind of having that conversation. But I think, yeah, bro, that's good. Like, I think those image bearing qualities and pointing them back to the fact that those image bearing qualities were given to them by the creator, I think is a cool way to help them see who God is.
Yeah. Um, I think one of I think I've been wrestling with the question. I'm just gonna put it out there, but I'm not saying I have the answer, but I think it's an interesting question. And um, it has to do with the existence of God. It has to do with like the ontological argument and the cosmological argument, things like that. It's just the question of how do you know if a mind exists? And is there evidence of God's mind in our world? And I think one of the things we can point to is the design of man. Um, uh,
I
the
mean,
fact that
nature, bro.
nature itself, right? And we don't have to get into it, but it just goes down like them if you can prove that a mind exists and what is a mind and things like that. But I think like when I think of Gen Z, I think the one of the things they struggle with the heaviest is ideas. And I don't think
What do
a
you mean
lot
by
of
that?
them so like there is this thing in our heads that comes up with um thoughts that we call ideas, concepts, later on principles and things of that nature. And it formulates our mind and our society. And when I look at Gen Z, I look at a lot of them, I don't think they know where their ideas come from.
Mm,
And
that's good.
maybe some of them do, right? I'm not because Gen Z is very smart. I have conversations with, I mean, we have them with several of them. Gen Z smart, but I don't think um a lot of them understand the consequences of these ideas. And because I think a lot of these ideas promote a false sense of freedom, um, a false sense of autonomy, uh,
Yes.
a false
Yes.
sense of
Bro, it's so good.
proclaiming self. You know what I mean? And so,
100%. So let me say something here, bro, because my brain
yeah,
is on fire right now.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, I 100% agree with you. And I think it comes back to a couple of things. But something you said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, you talked about this idea that we can change our attributes, right?
Mm,
And I'd go a little
yeah.
bit further. It's this idea that we can change our attributes without consequence. Because it's
Mm,
not that we do change our attributes, or at least in our own perception, we change our attributes, but we
mm,
believe that we can actually do that without consequence. But the truth is, what we're seeing,
mm,
like what we're seeing societally right now, is as we change our attributes, things ain't getting
mm.
better.
Yeah, it's true.
They're getting
Yeah.
worse. Mental health
Mm,
declining. You see what I'm saying? Relationships
yeah.
declining, right? Family
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
fractured than ever. You see what I'm saying? Politics more polarizing. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
as we're taking on this, like, we are literally bearing out the societal conclusions of the ideas that we hold to. And
Mm,
in this experiment, I think it's clear that it's not working. But that's a whole nother
mm,
conversation, right? Maybe that's
yeah.
overly simplistic, and I think some people would say it is. I don't think it is, but maybe it is. So
Mm,
changing attributes. So your thing, where do these ideas come from? And I think you're right. I think most people don't think about where their ideas come from. And here's what I
mm.
mean by that. We think that we actually learn things by ourselves.
Right.
Do you get,
Right.
because of
Yeah.
individualism, we actually
Yeah.
believe that we learn
Yeah.
things by ourselves. And what we don't
Mm,
realize is that we're being formed, right?
mm.
Which I also think is
Exactly.
something that is lost quite a bit in like Christianity, in the discipleship process in the church. Like, we're not talking enough about how we're being formed by the world, right? And we're not aware of it. We're not aware that I think it was James K. Smith. He talks about you are what you love, right? And he talks about this idea of
Yeah.
it's not just when you do something, doing it's not just doing that thing, it's what doing that thing does to you,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
what we don't realize is that every time we do something, it is shaping us. And so every time I sin, I'm being shaped towards sin. I'm being bent in that direction, right? And every time I engage in spiritual practices, or engage at church, or engage in spiritual conversations, or engage in prayer, or read the scriptures, or preach the gospel, I am being pulled in the direction of the kingdom, right? And so once again, I get that's like a simplistic way of thinking about it, because also day to day, every time I open my social media feed and I consume content, I'm being formed,
Yes.
right? Every
Yeah.
conversation, I'm being formed. Every interaction, I'm being formed constantly.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, what are those interactions? What is the content I'm watching? What are the things that I'm reading? How are they shaping my perspective on the world, on reality?
Mm. Yeah,
And so what's happening
I
to our
love
young
that.
people is they're being
I love
shaped
that.
by the things that they're consuming. But I don't think they know they're being shaped by the
Mm,
things that they're consuming.
mm,
And in the same way, a lot of adults in our churches are being shaped by the things that they're watching, the conversations that they're having, and the things that they're doing that nobody else knows about. But they don't think that they are. Do you get what I'm saying?
right. Yeah,
And
I do.
so uh
Yeah, I
I
like
think
that.
if we thought that, I think we would take the things that we do, the things that we say, the things that we watch more seriously.
Mm,
Because we would recognize it's
yeah,
not just that I'm consuming this thing, but as I consume it, it is consuming me in some way, shape, or
mm,
form. Do you get what I'm
yeah,
saying? It is shaping me.
I like that. And let's take it a step a little bit further, right? Um, Let's say, but this is where the power of the resurrection comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
and you really have to engage it because let's say some of them do know, but they do it anyway. So now we're talking about addiction. Now we're talking about um,
Or the war between
being
the flesh and the
the
spirit.
or the love of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is very hard to detach yourself from. And so this is
Mm-hmm.
again what Scripture says: "Be holy as He is holy." Right? It's calling us to be separated, um, not just in the sense of don't be like the world, don't imitate the world, but detach yourselves from the mind of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think as they think. Um, don't don't ponder the things they do. Um, this is what's interesting about Christ. So I had a and again, I don't understand what this means, but I'm just putting it out there because this is very interesting. I was having a conversation with a guy. He was one of my Lyft drivers, and he was clearly like he believed in science. He's heavy into science, right? Which again, we had this conversation last night, bro. It just seems like materialism and these things are just more favored than what is intrinsic in the metaphysical sense. But like we got to this point of what is real? What does real mean? And I got to thinking about Christ, bro. Like Christ, if you think about his his life and what he did, he brought, he truly brought in action, in thought, and words, he truly brought an objective truth that was absent the human mind. Like, and what I mean is that when I say objective, I mean that what he did was true in the sense that it didn't need my own mind for it to be true. He just brought a new life and
Mm.
displayed it for everyone to
Yeah, it's
see.
outside of me.
Is outside of me, and and it was perceived as offensive, opposing. They didn't know how to engage this life. They didn't know how to engage these words, these thought patterns. They didn't know how to engage it. It made the teachers who were scholars seem like idiots. They didn't even know how to explain, what do you mean that a man must be reborn? Must he go back into his mother? It's like he made even the scholars look idiotic. And so that in itself, it, he walked in objective truth. He walked in the true nature of what is God. And I just find that to be um, interesting. And I think that's a good conversation to have because, again, the reason why I bring it up is because that people say there is no objective morality, no objective truth. But when you look at the life of Christ, he obviously showed you that it actually does exist.
Yeah,
And so,
no one lives as if that's true. Like that's the
yeah,
thing that always
yeah,
trips me out. Like when people are like, "Oh, no such thing as objective truth, no such thing as morality." So then why do
yeah,
you live like it's true?
yeah, facts.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes like we just overcomplicate some of these things. Like, why do societies function the way that they do? You get what I'm saying? And we can get into the reality that there are other societies that function in other ways and blah, 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 blah. And there are things that we consider immoral that they wouldn't. I understand all of those things.
Hmm.
But once again, people don't function as if their life has no purpose and meaning and no value, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's inherent to the reality of who humans are, and that naturally points to the fact that there's a
Yeah.
creator and there's a moral standard naturally. But
Yeah.
once again, that's a whole nother conversation. And I think to your point, like Jesus isn't just proclaiming truth, right? Like, so Jesus in John 11, right? And my pastor preached on this a couple weeks ago. It's like Jesus doesn't just say, I'm going to resurrect. He says, I am the resurrection and the life.
Yeah.
Whoever believes in
Yeah.
me, though they may die, will not die. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And what's
Yeah.
his point? Like right now, death has power, right? And what does it have power to do? Because of sin, it has power to for you to die. That was never the intent. Humans were never supposed to die. We were never supposed to perish. But because sin entered in, now we die. Now we perish. And what's interesting about that is
Mm.
like humans don't die as if it's a natural thing. There's a ton of fear. There's a ton of mourning. There are all these things about someone dying that communicate naturally this is wrong.
Yeah. That's
And once
good.
again, we're a little bit
Yeah, that's
more
good.
okay. We're more okay with an older person dying because we say they've lived a long life, right? This is my pastor talked about this too. And but when a young person dies, we're like, they went too soon. Why did this happen? You know what I'm saying? And I think once again, we are, without even really thinking about it, pointing at the reality that we weren't actually supposed ever meant to die.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so what is Christ saying? That death is going to be conquered, that it'll just be a doorway. It'll be a passage for you to move through into what was always meant to be, which
Yeah.
is you never dying.
Mm. Yeah. That's good, bro. Um, I guess for me, it's like when I think of death, I think of like not just dying in the sense of no longer existing, but also dying in the sense of of being a human, right? Like the ongoing motion of decay is what leads the it's what lead like the fact that we work on ourselves to be numb to existence. We work on ourselves to be numb to things, to not care what people think, to not care what people say, uh, to be tough during hard times, like to take substances and alcohol, like to take we work. That is nothing but the activity in the motion of decay. And it's almost in the sense of like decay has a behavior to it. And
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
because it's sin. I mean, all those things are kind of like in relationship with each other, right? Sin, decay,
yeah,
death, like they're all
yeah,
intertwined and doing their thing together,
hmm,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
it's fascinating. It's
it is,
it's crazy to think about. And I mean, like, think about it this way too. Like when like we see somebody, we call it a fast life, right? And what do we mean? Somebody uses a bunch of hard drugs, they're out doing all types of wild stuff, robbing, stealing, sleeping around, doing whatever. We call that fast life. What do you
hmm,
notice about those people? They look significantly older than they actually are.
yeah,
Decay,
yeah,
which is attached
yeah,
to sin. And so
yeah,
as they sin more, right, and live a fast life, what do we see? Decay in their physical body, right? Decay in the mind, decay emotionally, right?
yeah,
And then obviously
yeah,
the final decay, the final decaying is like your body doesn't work anymore and you perish, right?
yeah. Mm. It's
It's
true.
crazy.
It
One
is.
of the other things that I'm thinking about for this generation in particular as well, when it comes to communicating the gospel to them and the resurrection, which I think is really compelling, is like the restoration of all things. And like, because obviously we know the young people care about justice, they care about things being made right. And I think like you see things being made right in the gospel, and then your call as a Christian to participate in making things right in the here and now, and in doing
Mhm.
so displaying the kingdom, right? And so obviously I know I can't go change the whole world, right? That's probably not going to happen. I mean, I think there are some people that have significant impacts on the world based on God calling them to do so, or God using their life to do so, or using them as part of a movement to do so, or whatever. But for most of us, we're going to live in our neighborhoods, we're going to live in our towns and in our cities. And but what I think we have the ability to do is to have influence in those places where we live and see the kingdom come about in those places that we live. And I think if we do that, recognizing that this story isn't my story, it's God's story. God is redeeming and restoring the world. I'm a part of that redemption and restoration. And there's the
Yeah.
fullness of it to come when sin is fully done away with and things will return to what they're supposed to be. But in the in between, I am giving my life to seeing that restoration come about in my life, in my family's life, in my neighborhood, in my church, in my community, in the schools that I'm connected to, in the workplace that I'm in. And the cool thing about that is, as I'm doing that, I know there are other people who love Jesus all around the world who are doing the same thing. And so, and
Mm.
God supernaturally is weaving all of that together to bring about his kingdom and to bring about our good at the same time. And so I get
Mm.
to like be a part of that. And so my life now has a purpose, a transcendent purpose and meaning. And also the things that I've been through in this life that are hard, the sufferings that I've experienced, the tragedies that have happened, God can turn and use those things now to minister to other people, to love other people, to encourage others, and to see goodness brought about in their lives as well. And so now I get to be a part of the redemption of existence. I get to see the things in my life that I've suffered that weren't supposed to happen be given purpose and meaning and used for the good of others, including myself. And in the
Mm.
end, I get to see all things redeemed and restored. No more sickness, no more death, no more cancer, no more pain, no more gang violence, no more drug addiction, no more racism, no more whatever. You see what I'm saying? All those
Mhm.
different, all the isms. But I
Yeah.
get to see the kingdom come about, and I get to see myself as I always was supposed to be. I get to see God for who he truly is, and everything will
Yeah.
be made right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. And I like that, man. I like the fact that we can engage with this. And that's why it's a body. That's why everybody has their own talents and gifts. You know, when you engage with the world, uh, I just find myself not afraid of the questions they ask. And I'm not afraid of the ideas they come up with because I know it
Nope.
all falls short. And
Agreed.
and I know that uh, there is not only there is an objective truth, but it has a structure of knowledge that can't be uh, destroyed. We have been given knowledge that cannot be destroyed, and
That's good.
it has a standard of which uh, it stands on that is so solid in its foundation. Um, you there's no argument that can actually oppose it, and I really am. That's why I'm not really afraid when it comes to conversations
Mm,
and ideas. It's like
it's good.
let's engage with this really because
Yeah.
ultimately we have to do what God says to. I want us to do to people what God says to us. God says to us, "Come and reason with me." He invites us to the table to have conversation, to dialogue,
That's good.
to wrestle with these things. I think it was one philosopher, he said that you can give someone the answer, but they, even though you gave them the answer, they still have to go through the intellectual process of getting to that answer itself. They
Hmm.
still have to think it through. They still have
Hmm.
to, you understand what I'm saying? There's
Hmm.
a wrestling in the mind when it comes to having an answer for something. And so when you tell people what things are, you can't be really upset with how they react because they still don't really get why you say something like that.
Hmm.
And so I
And I
find that
think,
pretty exciting, bro. Yeah.
and I think too, like there's different ways to engage with truth, right? So, like, I think a lot of times we focus on the mathematical, historical way of understanding truth, but I think truth is also something to be experienced, right? And so,
Yeah, it has
for
to be.
example, right, example, if I jump off a building, guess what? I'm not gonna fly because
Yeah.
gravity says otherwise. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
obviously, there are certain ways to, uh,
That's right. Well.
like airplanes, they can fly. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, we've experienced the reality of what it means to be on an airplane and fly. But my point is, like, there are ways that you experience truths in existence. And I think in the same way, like, Christ is a truth that you experience, right? And I think it's also important to remember as we, wrap up this convo that we can't convince people to follow Jesus. I can't convince youth. I can't convince family members, friends. What I do is proclaim and invite and trust God with the experience piece, which is
Yeah.
for him to reveal himself to them. And when that happens, everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything. And you and I know this very well.
Yes. Facts.
Very
Facts,
well.
bro. Facts, bro. Yeah.
Hmm. All right, bro. Well,
I enjoyed
we,
that.
yeah, man. Short one today, quick one today. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it too, bro. And like we always say, it's the beginning of the conversation, not the end. Questions, comments, concerns, you know where to find us. Share this with somebody you think it would encourage or it'd be helpful for them to hear. We love you. We'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.